Section: Introduction. In this section, we introduce a taxonomy to categorize language model (LM) memorization behaviors based on how humans memorize information. We identify three types of LM memorization: recitation, reconstruction, and recollection, which correspond to how humans recite direct quotes, reconstruct passages based on patterns, and sporadically remember fragments, respectively. We conduct experiments to explore the complex nature of memorization. By comparing memorized and unmemorized data, we analyze various factors such as corpus-wide statistics, datum-level metrics, and representational differences to understand what influences the likelihood of a sequence being memorized. Our experiments show that low perplexity is strongly linked to memorization, but this association varies for different examples. We observe that the number of memorized sequences increases with training time and model size across all categories. Recollection experiences the fastest growth, indicating factors beyond repeated exposure or random memorization. We develop logistic regression models to predict memorization for each category, outperforming baseline models. Our taxonomy helps differentiate between recitation and recollection by examining statistical dependencies, revealing that low perplexity prompts facilitate recitation while rare tokens constrain recollection. We define memorization as generating the next tokens verbatim when given the first k tokens, following the k extractable memorization definition with k equals 32. We analyze memorization across different model scales and training timings using Pythia models trained on the PILE dataset. Our analysis is based on a public dataset of 32 extractable samples from the PILE, ensuring that memorized sequences are verified against the training data. We also consider an unmemorized distribution by subtracting the memorized data from the entire dataset. Factors influencing memorization include corpus statistics, datum statistics, and model perplexity. We examine features related to duplication, semantic matches, textual matches, and token frequency to understand how memorization is affected by different properties. By comparing memorized and unmemorized data distributions, we identify key factors that influence memorization, such as the number of duplicates in the training corpus, semantic similarity, textual variations, and token frequency. These factors help predict memorization outcomes effectively. Section Summary. Introduction. In this section, we introduce a taxonomy inspired by human memorization behaviors to categorize language model (LM) memorization into recitation, reconstruction, and recollection types. By comparing memorized and unmemorized data distributions, we analyze factors influencing memorization likelihood, such as low perplexity and model size. Our experiments show that our taxonomy-based predictive model outperforms generic approaches, highlighting the impact of factors like low perplexity prompts on recitation and the constraint of rare tokens on recollection. Section: Sequence Properties. In this section, we examine sequence properties. We look at factors such as templating, compressibility, perplexity, and memorization taxonomy. Templating refers to patterns in a sample, like repeating sequences or incrementing numerical patterns. Compressibility measures how easily a sequence can be compressed. Perplexity calculates the average uncertainty in predicting tokens in a sequence. We then categorize memorized samples into recitation, reconstruction, or recollection types based on duplication in the training data and model behavior. Recitation involves duplicating sequences from the training data. Reconstruction reconstructs samples based on learned templates, and recollection is when a model recalls a sample not fitting the other categories. Section Summary. In this section, we explore sequence properties by considering factors such as templating, compressibility, perplexity, and a memorization taxonomy. Templating involves identifying predictable patterns like repeating or incrementing sequences. Compressibility is measured using Huffman coding length, while perplexity helps predict memorization likelihood. Additionally, we categorize memorized samples into recitation, reconstruction, and recollection types based on factors like duplication and template-based reconstruction. Section: distribution across scale and time. In this section, we examine how model size and training time affect the memorization process. We observe that larger models tend to memorize more data, likely because they have more parameters to capture sequences accurately. The impact of training time and model size on different types of memorization is investigated. We find that as the model size increases, the number of examples memorized also increases. Recollection of rare sequences grows significantly in larger models compared to smaller ones, while the ability to reconstruct sequences remains relatively stable across different model sizes. As training progresses, language models, LMs, tend to memorize more data. We explore whether this accumulation of memorized examples is solely due to exposure to heavily duplicated samples or if other factors contribute to memorization of rare sequences. Our analysis shows that memorization does not increase uniformly throughout training and that repeated exposure to heavily duplicated data is not the sole reason for increased memorization. The proportion of recitation decreases relative to overall memorization, indicating that repeated exposure to duplicated samples is not the primary driver of memorization growth. Instead, there is a notable increase in the recollection category, suggesting a focus on memorizing rarer sequences. Towards the end of training, there is a sudden increase in reconstruction, indicating a breakthrough in generalizing more complex patterns. We propose that memorization late in training is a result of a combination of factors, including repeated exposure, opportunities to memorize new sequences, and other unexplored influences. Our taxonomy, based on differences in dependencies between features, proves useful in predicting memorization patterns. By conducting statistical tests, we confirm that our taxonomy captures meaningful distinctions in dependencies, supporting its role in predicting memorization outcomes accurately. Our predictive model, based on this taxonomy, outperforms generic baseline models, showcasing the effectiveness of our approach in understanding and predicting memorization processes. Each model we use is a logistic regression trained with specific parameters and class weights. We split the data into test, train, and validation sets, normalizing features for consistency. The intuitive taxonomic model we develop consists of 3 binary logistic regression models, each trained on a different taxonomic category, demonstrating the effectiveness of our taxonomy in predicting memorization outcomes. Section Summary. In this section, we explore how model size and training time influence the memorization capabilities of language models. We find that larger models tend to memorize rarer sequences more effectively, while smaller models excel at extrapolating repeating patterns. Additionally, our taxonomy-based predictive model outperforms generic models in predicting memorization, indicating that understanding the dependencies between features can enhance model performance. Section: Optimally partitioned model. In this section, we presented an optimally partitioned model to show that our intuitive taxonomic model is not just benefiting from having more flexibility. We created an alternative taxonomic model with the same complexity as our intuitive model, using 3 binary logistic regressions. We searched for the best partition based on different feature threshold combinations. The optimal partition we found categorized samples based on Huffman coding length and sequence duplicate count. We considered the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles of the value distribution of each feature as potential thresholds for partitioning. Each feature threshold pair could split the data, and we selected the best 3-category partition based on the F1 score on the test set. Our intuitive taxonomy might perform better than the optimal partition because the search for thresholds was limited to quartile values of each feature. To evaluate our taxonomy, we compared it to a homogeneous baseline and the optimal partition. The greedy optimal partition slightly outperformed the baseline on most metrics, but our intuitive taxonomy was better calibrated and more accurate overall, except for the recollection set where it had low precision. This comparison led us to conclude that our intuition guided us to a better taxonomy than searching for different data partitions. We then explored the differences between the 3 taxonomic categories using the feature weights from our regression models. We found that rare sequences in the recollection category were more likely to be memorized if they did not contain rare tokens. Additionally, the number of duplicates in a recollection candidate influenced its memorization, while recitation candidates were not affected by duplicate count. We observed that beyond a certain threshold of duplicates, increased exposure did not lead to better memorization. Perplexity also played a role, with predictable continuations being strongly associated with memorization across all categories, except for cases of reconstruction. In discussing future work, we highlighted how an intuitive taxonomy can enhance our understanding of memorization and its implications. We connected our findings to existing literature on memorization ontologies, emphasizing the factors influencing memorization and potential future research directions in this area. Section Summary. In this section, we demonstrate the effectiveness of an intuitive taxonomic model by comparing it to an equally complex alternative model based on feature threshold combinations. By evaluating different partitioning strategies, we identify that our intuitive taxonomy outperforms the optimal partition in categorizing samples based on specific features. Additionally, we show that considering the differences in feature weights from regression models can provide insights into how recollection and recitation candidates are memorized differently, shedding light on the dynamics of memorization. Section: Ontologies and Statistics. In this section, we have developed a taxonomy that can be used as a model for understanding complex phenomena, such as in deep learning. We have assessed the effectiveness of this taxonomy by comparing predictive models that view memorization as a whole to models that consider memorization as a multifaceted process using our taxonomy. By examining the relationship between memorization and the characteristics of each category in our taxonomy, we have demonstrated the value of our taxonomic model in improving predictive accuracy. Our aim is to explain memorization behavior using a taxonomy and explore how different factors in memorization interact. We also aim to demonstrate how ontologies can be created and tested, as shown through our predictive models. However, it is important to note that our predictive models focus only on linear dependencies and do not cover general statistical dependencies. While we do explore more general dependencies in the supplementary experiments, the main experiments assume linear dependence. Therefore, the interactions between factors should be interpreted in the context of our supplementary experiments. We believe that future research inspired by our approach could enhance our work by considering more general dependencies. One limitation of our study is the definition of memorization we used, which may not capture fuzzy or partial memorization. Depending on how memorization is defined, we may not observe clear patterns of recitation or reconstruction. The measurement of memorization is a broad area with various definitions to choose from.